Hello, my name is Dr. Charles Durr, and I've been a practicing chiropractor for 12 years now. And for the purposes of this video, it's important to understand that I'm certified in functional blood chemistry analysis. And if you're watching this video, it's most likely that you or a loved one suffers from an underactive thyroid gland, or what's called hypothyroidism. And I've been certified in functional blood chemistry analysis by Dr. Tatis Karazian. He's the author of this new book, Why Do I Still Have Thyroid Symptoms When My Lab Tests Are Normal? Now, according to Dr. Karazian, the main symptoms of hypothyroidism are fatigue, weight gain, hair loss, constipation, low libido, cold hands and feet, depression, insomnia, nervousness, anxiety, heart palpitations, and many other symptoms. And unfortunately, according to Dr. Karazian, the modern approach to thyroid disease management is woefully antiquated and overly dependent on synthetic thyroid replacement hormone. And unfortunately, 27 million Americans suffer from some sort of hypothyroid disease. And the modern approach ignores many of the underlying causes and just worries about one thing: the thyroid stimulating hormone levels. And they can be normal, and you still can have a very dysfunctional thyroid gland. So according to Dr. Karazian, the main cause of hypothyroid disease is what's called Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is an autoimmune attack on your thyroid gland. So in essence, you really don't have a thyroid problem, you have an autoimmune disease. Your thyroid gland is being attacked and destroyed by your own body. Now, frequently, the underlying cause of Hashimoto's disease is an allergic or intolerance to gluten, which is a very similar molecule to the thyroid gland. So gluten is frequently implicated when you have Hashimoto's disease, but there can be other causes as well. Now, it's important to understand that Hashimoto's can be managed so that the immune attack slows down or is abated to a point where the thyroid can function normally. But if it's ignored and just thyroid stimulating hormone is used to ever compensate for the loss of thyroid tissue, the loss of tissue will never stop, and eventually it will burn out and cause permanent loss of thyroid function. So it's important to understand that it can be managed nutritionally with nutritional compounds, dietary changes, and so forth. But another problem with managing Hashimoto's is the lack of a comprehensive blood chemistry panel. And there are 7 subtypes of thyroid hormone that can be tested for, and 2 antibodies, thyroid binding globulin and thyroid peroxidase. Now, if there's antibodies to those 2 hormones or compounds, then you have an autoimmune attack. But if you have a thyroiditis and you have positive antibodies, that means you have an autoimmune disease probably attacking somewhere else in the body. And you could be getting a B12 anemia, or it's called pernicious anemia, from an autoimmune attack. And it's important to understand that if you don't address the underlying cause of your thyroid disease, the autoimmune problem, it's causing havoc and wreaking havoc throughout the entire body. So it's important to understand that Dr. Karazian has found a way to decrease the autoimmune attack and turn off the body's attack on its own thyroid gland. Now, the second leading cause of hypothyroidism is what's called pituitary hypofunction. Now, it's important to understand that the hypothalamus stimulates the pituitary gland to produce thyroid-stimulating hormone. Now, the thyroid gland then will produce thyroid hormone in T4 and T3. T3 is the active form that can be absorbed into the cells, and the thyroid gland then tells the body what to do. And it's important to understand that the thyroid gland is the governor for the entire function of every metabolic activity within your body. So if the T3 cannot get into the cells, or the T4 cannot be broken down into T3, then the result is a decreased performance of the thyroid gland. So if the pituitary gland is sluggish due to excessive stress and cortisol released by the adrenal glands, it starts to become sluggish, and then the thyroid becomes sluggish. So it's also important to understand that this can be managed both nutritionally and through dietary changes, nutritional compounds, and so forth. And then the third leading cause is what's called thyroid underconversion. So if you have chronic stress and cortisol release, what happens is the thyroid gland cannot break down T4 into T3. All right? And what happens is you have an excess of T4, decrease of T3, and it can't get into the usable form, which is then delivered into the cells. Now, how the thyroid gland works is basically it's a butterfly-shaped gland on your Adam's apple. After the pituitary signals it to produce thyroid hormones, 20% is usable immediately in what's called T3. 20% is unusable in what's called reverse T3. And then 60% is produced in T4. Now that T4 is delivered to the gut and the liver to be broken down into be usable T3. So if you have problems with liver due to poor sugar problems or cholesterol issues or taking statin drugs, and your liver can't perform properly, it will not break down the T4 into T3. And 20% of your T4 is transferred to usable T3 in your gut. So you have excess of what's called dysbiosis, which means you have bad bacteria overgrowing good bacteria, excessive yeast due to antibiotic use and so forth. Those good bacteria will not transform that T4 into T3, which will then be delivered to the cells. So you get thyroid underconversion from chronic stress, among other problems. Then there's thyroid overconversion, when there's too much T3 broken down, and there's a decrease in the thyroid binding globulin. The thyroid binding globulin delivers the thyroid hormone to the cells in the bloodstream. So if you have insulin resistance, hypoglycemia, dysglycemias, or even diabetes, you tend to have a decrease in the thyroid binding globulin and too much conversion of T4 into T3. Now, another cause of thyroid underperformance is thyroid binding globulin elevation, and this is usually caused by estrogen therapies or birth control pills. And what happens is if you have too much thyroid binding globulin, when it gets produced in the thyroid gland and delivered to the cells by thyroid binding globulin, they don't let it go. So what happens is you have normal blood tissue, blood tests, but the hormones can't get released into the cells. And another main cause is what's called thyroid resistance. And this is when you've been on thyroid replacement hormones for so long, and the amount of thyroid stimulating hormone has been so great that the cells become desensitized. They start to ignore the signals of the thyroid hormone, and you need more and more to try and get those thyroid hormones into the cells to do their job. So it's Hashimoto's 70% of the time, pituitary hypofunction, thyroid underconversion of T4 to T3, thyroid overconversion of T4 to T3, too much thyroid binding globulin, which won't let the thyroid hormones into the cells, thyroid resistance caused by too much hormone over a long period of time, desensitizing the cells to the hormone itself. Now, many of the underlying causes of thyroid disease or dysfunction are anemias. Okay, anemias is what's called, according to Dr. Karazian, a deal breaker. If you have anemia, it will be impossible for your body to perform properly and produce the proper amount of thyroid hormone. So it's one of the first things we address nutritionally in our protocol. Dysglycemia is also a very, very big cause of thyroid disorders. Dysglycemia is, like I said before, contribute to thyroid overconversion, increased thyroid binding globulin, and overall stress on the adrenal glands, the liver, and so forth. Because if you have excess blood sugar, the liver has to break down that sugar into fat. You see a raising of your triglycerides, and the liver then becomes overburdened, where it can't convert T4 into T3 like it's supposed to.